this. You're all set for that weekend getaway, bags packed, snacks ready, but your car decides to pull a disappearing act.
Oh, no.
Yeah, right. But then your friend steps in, offers their car like a true hero.
A knight in shining armor?
Right. Crisis averted, you'd think. But here's a question for you.
Okay.
Are you actually insured to drive their car?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's what we're diving into today. Do you need insurance to be driving your friend's car in the UK?
It's a question that catches so many people out. They just sort of assume, well, my friend's got insurance, so I'm good.
Right.
But it's a little bit more complicated than that. And the UK law on this is very, very clear. To drive any vehicle on a public road, you absolutely must have valid insurance.
So no borrowing your mate's car for a quick dash to the shops without insurance. No exceptions.
Nope, not even for a second. It makes no difference if it's your best friend's car or you're just, moving a couple of feet. The law applies to absolutely everybody in all situations.
Okay, point taken. But what about that driving other cars extension, that DOC thing? Isn't that kind of like a get-out-of-jail-free card for driving other people's cars?
The DOC extension. Sounds great in theory, but in reality, it's a very, very specific perk. And it often has quite a lot of limitations. First of all, it's not as common as you might think. You only actually find it on some comprehensive car insurance policies.
Right.
And even then, it usually only offers third-party coverage. So that means you're only covered for damage to other people's property or if you injure someone else, but not if you damage the actual car that you've borrowed.
So if I back into a post trying to parallel park my friend's car,
yeah,
even with a DOC extension, I'm paying for the repairs.
Exactly. And that's not all. The DOC coverage tends to come with age restrictions. Often if you're under 25, you won't be covered. So it's not a particularly reliable solution for younger drivers.
So basically, assuming that you're covered by your friend's insurance is a big no-no.
Yeah, don't do it. The risks are way too high to even think about it. And that's where temporary insurance comes in as a much safer and more practical option.
Okay, let's break down this temporary insurance thing.
Yeah.
What exactly is it and how does it work?
Well, imagine insurance on demand. So you need cover for a specific period of time. Could be a day, a week, or even up to a month. That's where temporary insurance comes in.
Right.
It's super flexible. You only pay for the time you need the car, which makes it really handy. And often it works out cheaper than other options, especially for short-term borrowing.
So no need to commit to a long-term insurance plan.
Exactly, yeah.
That's a plus.
And the best part is you can usually get covered online in a matter of minutes. No hanging about, no loads of paperwork.
Right.
Lots of providers offer this, and the application process is usually pretty straightforward.
Okay.
You just enter a few basic details, choose your coverage level, and boom, you're insured.
That sounds super convenient.
Yeah.
But is the coverage as comprehensive as a standard car insurance policy?
Yeah.
Like, am I actually protected if something happens?
Well, that's what makes temporary insurance really stand out. It often offers comprehensive cover. So that means you're not just covered for damage to other people and their property, that's third-party liability, but you're also covered for damage to the car you've borrowed.
Mm-hmm.
So that little fender bender, covered.
Okay.
Scrape the bumper while parking, covered.
That's a huge relief. No more awkward conversations about splitting repair costs with your friend.
Precisely. And another great thing is any claims that you make on a temporary policy, they don't affect your friend's no claims bonus.
Okay, right.
Their insurance history stays completely clean.
It sounds like temporary insurance is a win-win. It's legal, it's flexible, it's comprehensive, and it protects your friend's insurance record. What's not to love?
It's a really smart move in many situations. I had a friend who once borrowed a car for a weekend away, and they thought they were covered under the owner's insurance. Turns out they weren't. They had a small accident, and they ended up having to pay quite a lot of money for the repairs. And it really put a strain on their friendship.
Yeah.
If they just sorted out temporary insurance, the whole situation would have been so much less stressful and expensive.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of why sorting out the insurance is absolutely crucial. Peace of mind and potentially saving a friendship, can't put a price on that.
Absolutely. But before we declare temporary insurance the outright winner, let's look at another option which might be a good fit for some people who are borrowing a car. That's the named driver option.
Right. The classic add me to your policy scenario.
Yeah.
So how does that work and how does it compare to temporary insurance?
Okay, well, being a named driver on your friend's policy means you're officially included in their insurance coverage. Your friend would need to contact their insurer and add you to the policy. This can actually work out to be a good deal if you're borrowing the car very regularly, as it could be more cost-effective in the long run.
So if you and your friend are essentially sharing a car, it might make sense to go down this road.
Exactly. But here's the catch. Adding a named driver, especially one who's relatively new to driving or has had a few claims in the past, can really bump up your friend's premium.
So it's not just about convenience, it directly impacts your friend's wallet.
Absolutely. And unlike temporary insurance where you're covered for a fixed period,
Yeah.
being a named driver is ongoing. So your friend is going to be paying that higher premium for as long as you're on the policy, even if you're not actually using the car at that time.
So it's a much bigger commitment, both financially and in terms of time.
It is, yeah. And there's one more important point. If you as a named driver have an accident, any claims are going to go through your friend's insurance. And this could potentially affect their no claims bonus and bump up their premiums in the future.
Wow, that's a big deal. So even if it's not my car, my driving record can mess with my friend's insurance.
That's the reality of being a named driver, yeah. It's shared responsibility, shared risk.
So deciding between temporary insurance and being a named driver really comes down to how often you'll be borrowing the car, the level of risk involved, and how much both you and your friend are willing to commit financially.
Absolutely. Temporary insurance offers flexibility and keeps the risks separate, whereas being a named driver might be easier on your wallet if you borrow the car a lot. But it involves that shared responsibility and the potential impact on your friend's insurance history.
All right, so we've covered the legal stuff, the temporary insurance route, and the named driver option. But what about those people who think they can just wing it and drive without any insurance? What sort of risks are they taking?
Now we're getting to the serious stuff.
Yeah.
Driving without insurance in the UK, it's not just a minor slip-up. It's a full-blown criminal offense with some pretty heavy consequences.
Okay, time for a dose of reality. Lay it on us.
Okay, first up, you're looking at a hefty fine, at least £300.
Oh, wow.
And that's just for starters. You'll also get 6 penalty points on your license. And for new drivers, those 6 points could mean losing their license altogether, especially since they only need to get 6 points in the first 2 years after passing their test.
Right.
And guess what? It doesn't end there.
Well, if there's more.
Oh, yes. In more serious cases, you could end up in court, where the fines are unlimited and you could even get a driving ban. Think about the impact that would have on your life, your job, your freedom. It's just not worth the risk.
That's a pretty sobering thought. And we haven't even touched upon the financial nightmare if you have an accident while you're uninsured.
You're right. If you're uninsured and you cause an accident, you are personally liable for any damage to other vehicles, property, and worst of all, to other people. We're talking potentially life-changing costs here. Repairs, medical bills, legal fees, the lot.
Let's paint a picture for our listeners. Say you're driving uninsured and unfortunately you cause an accident. It results in significant damage to another car, and the other driver is injured.
Well, in that situation, you're not only facing those legal consequences we talked about, but you're also personally responsible for the entire financial cost of the accident. You could be looking at tens of thousands of pounds in repair costs, medical bills, and potential legal settlements.
Yeah.
It could wipe you out financially.
It's a stark reminder that insurance isn't just about following the law. It's about protecting yourself and other people from a potential financial catastrophe.
It's your safety net, your shield against the unexpected. And let's be honest, the cost of insurance is tiny compared to the potential cost of driving without it.
Okay, so we've established that driving uninsured is a hard pass. But what about emergencies? You know, those situations where you need to borrow a car in a hurry? Surely there's an exception to the rule then, right?
It's a really common misconception that in an emergency, you don't need insurance. But the law's the law. You need insurance to drive no matter what. No exceptions.
So no matter how urgent the situation is, jumping into a friend's car without insurance is still a legal and financial risk.
Absolutely. The risks don't just disappear because it's an emergency. And the good news is these days, getting temporary insurance is so quick and easy. There's just no reason to drive uninsured even if you're in a rush.
Okay, that's good to know. So even if I'm rushing someone to the hospital or need to pick up an emergency prescription, taking a few minutes to get temporary insurance online could save me a whole lot of trouble.
Think of it this way. Those few minutes that you spend getting insured could prevent years of financial hardship and legal headaches. It's a small investment for a huge amount of peace of mind.
Right. All right, we've busted the emergency exception myth wide open. Now let's dig a little deeper into this temporary insurance. What are the key things that determine how much a temporary policy costs?
Well, just like standard car insurance, temporary insurance premiums are calculated based on a number of different factors.
Right.
And these factors help insurers work out the level of risk involved and set the premium accordingly.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of deal.
No, not at all. One of the biggest factors is the driver's age. Younger drivers are statistically more likely to be involved in accidents, so their premiums are usually higher. It all comes down to how insurers assess risk.
Makes sense. What else plays a role?
Well, your driving history is another really important one. Any past claims or points on your license can increase the premium because, well, they suggest a higher chance of future incidents.
So a clean driving record not only keeps you safe on the road, but also helps to keep your insurance costs down. Win-win.
Absolutely. And then you've got the type of car you're borrowing. Higher value or high-performance cars are just more expensive to insure because of the higher repair costs and the risk of theft.
So borrowing your friend's fancy sports car might come with a heftier insurance price tag than going for their trusty family hatchback.
Exactly. And finally, the length of coverage also plays a part.
Okay.
Longer coverage periods naturally cost more because you're exposed to risk for a longer time.
So whether I need the car for a couple of hours or a few weeks, the length of my temporary insurance will affect the price.
Exactly. Understanding these factors can help you to anticipate the potential cost of temporary insurance and make good decisions about borrowing a car.
This has been super insightful. We've covered a lot of ground, from the legal must-knows to the nitty-gritty of temporary insurance. But let's get down to the practicalities. How do you actually go about getting temporary insurance when you need it? Is it a complicated process?
No, thankfully, it's become incredibly straightforward. Most providers have online applications that are designed to be really quick and easy to use. You can usually get a quote and be covered in just a few minutes.
That's good to hear, especially if you need insurance in a hurry.
Absolutely. You typically just need to provide some basic information like your personal details, your driving history, the car's registration number, and how long you need the cover for. And then the provider calculates your premium based on all those factors we were talking about earlier.
So no stacks of paperwork or endless phone calls?
No, not at all. It's all streamlined and digital. And once you've paid, your coverage is usually active straight away, so you can legally hit the road right away.
That's seriously convenient. Any tips on finding reliable temporary insurance providers in the UK?
Yeah, there are a number of really well-established providers that specialize in temporary car insurance. A quick online search will give you a good list to start with. It's always a good idea to compare quotes from a few different providers to make sure you're getting the best deal.
Solid advice. So, we've got the legal stuff sorted, we've explored the insurance options, and we know how to get covered quickly. But before we wrap things up, let's talk about best practices for borrowing a friend's car. What are some key tips to make sure it's a smooth and safe experience for everyone involved?
Well, borrowing a car, even from a close friend, it comes with certain responsibilities. Clear communication and mutual respect are absolutely essential to avoid any misunderstandings or potential arguments.
So it's not just about the car, it's about keeping the friendship intact.
Exactly. Before you even ask to borrow the car, think about whether you really need to. Could you manage with other transport? Or could you share driving with your friend?
Sometimes we jump to borrowing without considering other options.
It happens. And if you do decide to ask, be upfront about why you need the car, how you'll be using it, and how long for.
No vague requests or last-minute surprises. Got it.
Exactly. Honesty and transparency are crucial for building trust. And be respectful of your friend's decision, even if they say no.
Right. It's their car, their choice. Respecting their boundaries is paramount.
Absolutely. Now, if they do agree to lend you the car, be crystal clear about the insurance arrangements. Don't just assume anything. Make sure you're clear whether you will be added as a named driver or if you need to sort out temporary insurance.
No room for assumptions when it comes to legal and financial responsibilities.
Exactly. Also, make sure you understand any specific rules or preferences your friend might have about their car. Do they have a favorite petrol station? Are there any parking restrictions? Things like that.
Those little details can make all the difference to having a smooth and positive borrowing experience.
Absolutely. It's all about showing your friend that you respect them, their car, and their trust.
What about after you've borrowed the car? Any tips for a smooth return?
Yeah, well, returning the car in the same condition you received it is obviously essential. Fill up the petrol tank, clean out any rubbish, and be honest about any little scratches or incidents, even if they seem insignificant.
So honesty and transparency are key, even if it's a little ding you'd rather ignore.
It's all about taking responsibility and respecting your friend's property. And a little gesture of thanks can go a long way too. A thank you card, a small gift, or even just offering to help them out with something in return.
It's those little acts of kindness that really make friendships stronger.
Exactly. By approaching car borrowing with respect, open communication, and a genuine desire to maintain a good friendship, we can ensure that it's a positive experience for everybody involved.
Well said. It's a great reminder that borrowing a car is more than just a transaction. It's a chance to strengthen bonds and show we care about the people in our lives.
Absolutely. Now, let's shift gears a little and dive into some of the more technical aspects of car insurance, particularly those tricky terms and conditions that often leave people scratching their heads.
Time to decode some insurance jargon.
Okay, let's start with a term we've mentioned briefly, third-party liability. This is the absolute minimum level of car insurance required by law in the UK, and it covers you if you cause damage to someone else's property or if you injure someone while driving.
So it protects other people from you, but not necessarily you from yourself.
That's right. Third-party insurance doesn't cover any damage to the car you're driving or any injuries to yourself.
So if I'm borrowing my friend's car and I accidentally back into a lamppost, even with third-party insurance, I'm responsible for the repairs.
Yes, you are. That's why it's so important to understand the limitations of the different levels of cover.
What other types of cover are there?
Well, the next level up is third-party, fire, and theft. This gives you the same protection as third-party liability, but it also covers damage to the car if it's stolen or damaged by fire.
Okay, so if the borrowed car is caught in a fire or stolen from the driveway, I'm covered for the loss.
That's right, but it still wouldn't cover damage that you caused to the car yourself, through your own driving.
Okay, so what about cover for that?
Well, the most comprehensive level of coverage is called, you guessed it, comprehensive insurance. And it really lives up to its name because it offers the widest protection. It covers damage to the car, no matter who's at fault, as well as third-party liability, fire, and theft.
So if I accidentally scrape the car against a wall or have a little fender bender, I'm covered for those repairs.
Exactly. Comprehensive insurance offers the most peace of mind because it protects you from the widest range of potential incidents.
It does sound like the ultimate safety net. But is it much more expensive than the other options?
Well, it does usually come with a higher premium, yes. But that added protection and peace of mind can be well worth the extra costs, especially when you're driving somebody else's car.
It's all about weighing up the risks and the benefits and choosing the level of cover that makes sense for you and your situation.
Absolutely. And talking of situations, there's another insurance term you should be familiar with, excess.
Excess? Was that like a bonus?
Not quite. Excess is the amount of money you have to pay towards a claim before the insurance company pays the rest.
Okay, so if the excess on a policy is £500 and I have an accident that causes £2,000 worth of damage, I have to pay the first £500 and the insurance company covers the remaining £1,500.
That's it, yeah. The excess amount can change depending on the policy and the driver. Younger drivers and those with previous claims often have higher excesses.
So it's another important thing to consider when comparing different insurance options.
Definitely. Make sure you're clear about the excess amount and that you can actually afford to pay it if you need to make a claim.
Wow, we just had a crash course in car insurance jargon. We've cleared up some of the key terms and highlighted how important it is to understand what you're covered for and what your responsibilities are.
You know what they say, knowledge is power. Especially in the world of insurance.
So we've covered the legal side of things, the human element, and the technical aspects of insurance. What else do our listeners need to know to ensure they have a smooth and responsible experience when borrowing a car?
Okay, let's focus on some practical tips and potential pitfalls to watch out for. One common mistake that people make is assuming their own car insurance automatically covers them to drive any car.
Right, we debunked that myth earlier. It's your friend's insurance that's important, not yours.
Exactly. And even if your policy does have a driving other cars extension, you need to understand the limitations, especially the restriction to third-party cover and the potential age limits.
So then, assuming I'm automatically covered for damage to the borrowed car just because I've got my own insurance?
Exactly. Another common pitfall is forgetting to tell your friend's insurance company that you're going to be driving their car.
Isn't that only really relevant if I'm being added as a named driver?
Well, yes. But even for temporary borrowing, it's a good idea to check with your friend whether their insurer needs to know. Some policies might have specific rules about temporary drivers, or they might need extra information about your driving history.
So it's all about being transparent and making sure everyone's in the loop.
Right. And while we've talked about the advantages of temporary insurance, there are a few potential downsides to watch out for as well.
Oh, do tell.
Well, some temporary insurance policies might have exclusions for certain types of car usage, like using the car for business purposes or for commuting.
So if I'm planning to use my friend's car for a work trip, I need to double-check my temporary policy covers that.
Absolutely. And keep an eye out for any mileage limits. Some policies might restrict how many miles you can drive while you're covered.
Okay, so if I'm planning a long road trip, I need to make sure I'm within the mileage allowance.
Exactly. It's all about reading the small print and making sure the policy is right for what you'll be using the car for.
This has been incredibly helpful. We've covered so much ground, from the importance of communication and respect to the ins and outs of different insurance policies and potential pitfalls to avoid.
I think we've given our listeners a comprehensive toolkit to help them navigate the world of car borrowing safely and responsibly.
Stay tuned for the final part of this episode, where we'll wrap up our deep dive with some concluding thoughts and key takeaways.
We'll leave you with some empowering advice and encourage you to keep exploring this really important topic, making sure you're well-informed and confident behind the wheel, whether you're in your own car or borrowing a friend's.
Until then, drive safe and drive smart. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been looking at all the things you need to know about borrowing a friend's car here in the UK.
Yeah, we've covered the legal side of things, looked at the different insurance options, and even shared some practical tips to make sure the whole borrowing experience goes smoothly.
Now let's wrap things up with a few final words of wisdom to make sure our listeners are fully prepared to hit the road safely and responsibly.
You know, it's amazing how many people don't think about putting things in writing, even when they're borrowing a car from a mate.
You mean like having a formal agreement? Doesn't that seem a bit over the top for a casual car loan between friends?
It might seem that way, but honestly, it can prevent a lot of problems and misunderstandings later on. Even just a simple agreement that sets out the terms of the borrowing, the dates, how the car's going to be used, insurance details, any agreements about fuel or mileage, it can be really helpful.
So it's about creating a clear record, even if it's just a friendly arrangement.
Exactly. It just adds a layer of transparency and protection for both the person borrowing the car and the person lending it. And speaking of protection, it's important to remember to drive responsibly, no matter whose car you're behind the wheel.
You're right. It's easy to get caught up in all the logistics of borrowing and forget about the core responsibility of being a safe and considerate driver.
Absolutely. When you're driving a borrowed car, you're not just representing yourself, you're representing the owner of the car too. Their reputation is at stake, and maybe even their insurance premiums.
So it's about being extra careful and realizing that your actions have implications for other people, not just you.
Exactly. Follow the rules of the road, be mindful of other drivers, and avoid anything risky that could put the car or anyone else in danger.
Excellent advice. Before we go, let's go back to the question we started with. Do you need insurance to drive your friend's car in the UK?
As we've seen, the answer is a definite yes. The law is very clear on this. No insurance, no driving, no exceptions.
And luckily, there are easy and affordable ways to make sure you're covered without emptying your bank account or affecting your friend's insurance.
Yeah, temporary insurance and the named driver option both have their pros and cons, and the right option really depends on your individual situation.
We've given our listeners all the info they need to make good choices and navigate this sometimes confusing area with confidence.
Remember, knowledge is power. And in this case, it's also about protection. Protecting yourself, your friends, and everybody else on the road.
This deep dive has been all about taking the mystery out of car borrowing, debunking those common myths, and giving our listeners the tools they need to be responsible and well-informed, whether they're the one borrowing a car or the one lending it.
We've looked at the legal side of things, the money side, the technical bits, and even the human side of this important topic.
And as we wrap up this episode, we want to leave you with one last thought. Borrowing a car is a privilege. It's a sign of trust, and it's a chance to show respect and responsibility.
By remembering those things and by making sure we know all the facts, we can ensure that every car journey, whether it's in our own car or a friend's, is a safe, legal, and enjoyable one.
Drive safely, drive responsibly, and remember, knowledge is the key to a smooth and secure ride. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.